Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to our weekly get-together here at Work Cookie and the Work Cookie podcast. We are a group of IOs, HR, recruiters, and one actor helping people in the business world to find more success. Jeremy, speaking of success, today we're going to talk about selecting and energizing teams. That sounds like a two-parter. First of all, selecting the right people, and then getting them to work productively. Sounds easy.
It does on face value, doesn't it? So there's a lot. It's interesting when you look at teams. So you have interdisciplinary teams. You have, of course, like task force. When you look into the history of it, basically you look at enterprises going back to 1908, and you look at the other successful American adventures, right? Like the Apollo program from 61 to 69. And because of the space rivalry with the Soviet Union, task forces really started to become an optimal way of working with research and development and so forth. So we can there's a lot of different takeaways from that. And also we look at what are the questions we should be asking when we're looking for someone new to come on, when we're evaluating our current team, when we're putting together a new team from scratch. And then also, how do those personalities work? So when you look at the different personality types, what are the optimal types of personalities to have on one particular team? So there's a lot. There's a lot. I mean, I was looking through and all the research into this. We could really do. I mean, we could have an entire podcast series on this. So maybe we'll continue off of these with some offshoots later on. But I'll turn it back over to you for now, Tom, but there's an introduction for our topic today.
Well, thank you very much, Jeremy. And Ariana, I'd actually love to go to you first because HR, when we're recruiting, are we actually thinking about all those things that Jeremy's talking about is this going to be the best team member to join the organization? Are we actually doing that?
Well, I've never been in HR or in recruiting, so I might not be the exact right person to ask, but in my perspective, probably not. And I think the reason is that it's really challenging to consider all the factors that we want to. So usually we go based on a job description, and IOs love a good job description. And then we'll create maybe structured interviews based on the skills needed. And then you vet a few candidates and they meet with a number of people on the teams, maybe do a skill assessment, and then we hire them. But sometimes other times people use personality assessments and things like that. But I think that in an ideal state, in a perfect world, we'd want to select based on everything. So person role fit, person team fit, person organization fit, personality composition when considering the other personalities on the team and where are the gaps in the personality and how can these people add value. Also a skill fit, and I think that we can want a lot of perfect fits in all these areas, but at the end of the day, we only have so many things that we can select on and so many candidates and so much time to put them through a selection process.
Well, Linda Ann, let me go to you because what Dr. Ariane is describing sounds really good to me, but do we have time?
Well, I mean, it depends on how important it is for you to get the right person. However, I think that sometimes it can be overthought, and I don't think a lot of employers have the wherewithal to go into that kind of depth. And even if they bring in an IO to help them with that, that's what Ariana described is a pretty tall order. So the way I bring it down is, first, as we go through this process today, anytime you hire somebody, you should be reviewing that job description and evaluating, do you really need to hire that person that you're describing there? Or do the tasks and responsibilities need to change, given that maybe the last time you did that job description, it was 3, 4, 5 years ago. And the landscape has changed significantly. And if they're working from, as part of a remote model, are all those tasks necessary, and do they even exist anymore, and those kinds of things. So I think as we hire each person, there needs to be an evaluation of the job description to see that it is an accurate one anymore.
Right.
Then
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish your thought.
And then we need to look at the fact that what is happening now is a lot of times people are putting together these job descriptions to hire for, and they've decided that if I write down every possible thing that this person can need to do, and I hire a person with all those skills, then I will have the perfect hire, and it'll be a set it and forget it kind of thing. And I'm going to tell you now, stop doing that. It's not going to work.
What, you're telling me it doesn't work? Lee, I'd love to go to you, because how does the military recruit and kind of, hire people for team positions, which, if you look at it, is really what they're doing? But do they have the evaluation process, or is it more like there's a warm body, let's grab them?
Well, first, I would debate whether or not they're recruiting people for team positions. You think about the size of the Navy, and you really don't know where somebody's going to end up. So I can't say that, USS whatever in San Diego is going to need exactly this guy that I am recruiting in Iowa. It's, and not only that, there are differences significant differences between the people who serve on the East Coast and serve on the West Coast. Just that, and there's a rivalry there, which is kind of interesting and entertaining. With an organization that size, where you're basically a lot of times you're not even really picking it based on the job. Honestly, like my military specialty is information systems technician. So when they look at it, they look at, I need an IT of a certain level with potentially some particular background based on some qualifications, little codes they put in boxes. And so you have what we call a detailer, where you call them up and they go, all right, I got 5 jobs. What, rank them? Well, you can't have the first 2, so you get number 3. And that, and they do it based on they need a body. And a lot of times it is they need a body. And depending on, there are some what we call screen billets, where they go through and they actually look at your evaluations and your performance and that kind of thing, and to try to decide whether or not you really can do what they need you to do. But a lot of times, especially with really junior people, you meet the wiggets, you're not in trouble, you got a pulse. We need you to fill this hole. And even then, it's a constant struggle because, we're always undermanned. So there's never enough people. So then you do have some competition going on there, which also means that you may get the guy that you really don't want because there isn't anybody else. And there's there's actually a big push in the Navy right now, looking at the fit, to put the right person in the right place, and to really look more at a skill level. And it's a monumental task. It's been going on for a long time. I don't know if they'll ever get it done. And part of that is because year to year, the demographics change. The guy that we're recruiting today is not the guy we recruited a year ago. And we're always behind. So we say we need so many of this particular specialty this year. Maybe we probably needed them last year, and this year we actually need something different. So we don't have near the flexibility, the majority of the time that the civilian world has, is, making teams. Task force are a little different. A lot of times for working groups and task force, you can go through and you can say, okay, I want this guy, this guy, this guy. You can have people apply because they're special things. They look good on your evaluation. But as far as who's showing up at your command today, you don't have any say in it usually. You get a notice that says, Seaman Timmy has orders and he's coming to you next week, and we don't know much else. So,
well, Well, it sounds like that should change.
It really should. It really should. And we're remarkably successful for what we deal with.
Right.
There are always things that could change. And really, part of the issue, I think, is because of the way that we do business. I mean, so, you hire somebody today and they don't work out. What do? Well, you probably get rid of them. And, in the military, they've got 4 more years of contract. So unless they really do something that, of a legal nature or disciplinary nature that will allow you to actually remove them from service, you're stuck with them. And when they show up at your organization on a 3-year tour, you're stuck with them. They are trying to get more corporate. And actually, I would love to talk to, because I hear the Air Force is actually better at that. And I'd love to talk to someone about that. But they're trying to get there. I don't know if we'll ever see it.
Well, we can only hope. Jeremy, let's go to you first, and then Linda, we'll come back to you.
There's questions that very basic questions, kind of going back to what everyone's saying, basic questions that people ask when trying to figure out what is needed on a team. We also have to look at this kind of this rubber band kind of deal between individualism and team cohesion, because it's like an inverted V. Because the more and more we have, individual provides people with the freedom and responsibility, but then you get the isolation. When you have teamwork, you have a greater possibility of things happening because you have all this knowledge, skills, the experiences coming together. But at the same time, we don't want to fall too much so that we lose our personal identity. So then we fall back into individualism. But then if you have too much individualism, then you need the teamwork so that you can be more productive and reduce isolation. So the conclusion here is you can start to put if you have a clear goal. It sounds very basic, right? We talk about goals all the time, but think about what is it going to generate some kind of initiative for success. We've talked about the Eagles and the Rattlers experience. It was back like the Solomon Asch psych experiment back in, I think, 1969, where you have these 2 rival boys' summer camps, and they had a food truck breakdown. And in order to get the food truck, they had to actually work together and stop hating each other to get the food truck so that they could eat. So we start looking at common purposes and common goals, but it falls back to asking some of these questions too. Very simply, what is the team like now? What is the ideal team? What do we do now with less effort and succeed where others fail? If we were to do anything differently, what would that be? So start to look at what the team consists of now. And I think a really important note is when you look at superstars. Teams, I think it was it NASA that found this out? Teams, because you have NASA, you have all these obviously brilliant scientists. So they started putting them on these task force, and they realized that these teams of all superstar smart people were performing less good than the mediocre teams. And there's some reasons for that, identity and pride and all that thing. But also look back, I think it was the 1998 Brazilian World Cup soccer team, right? All stars. They ended up losing in the last match because when you have too many superstars, you don't have that team gel. So sometimes, when you look at your average, sometimes just a set of mediocre players on your team who work well together, understand each other's personalities, can outperform a team of high performers. So looking at the team dynamic as well, every team also has to have somebody creative on that team and also somebody to spark action. Sometimes they're the same person, sometimes not. When you are putting together a team, also it doesn't hurt to have a star player here and there, but again, it's always looking back at the overall team dynamic. What's missing? What are the different personalities that we have? What are the personalities that we need? And there's one last thing in terms of the I can't think of that thought. Tom, I'm going to put it back to you. Go ahead. And you're on mute.
Thank you. I'm just going to write to Linda Ann.
Here we go. Okay. A couple of things. I think that when we're looking at teams, it's also the same way I think that people should be looking for employees. And that is, number one, you for both teams and employees, you're going to look at somebody who's self-selecting, ideally self-selecting the team or the company, right? Because that's the most motivating. Then you want to make sure that they align in value systems, that an employee or a team member aligns with the value system within the organization or the team. Because if you don't, then somewhere down the line, you're going to find some dissonance and discord. Then there needs to be alignment with purpose. You know, when you self-select a team, if they are motivated to work on that particular project, then they will be more active and productive in that team. And then look for enthusiasm for learning, problem solving, and then overall skill set. Because the energizing and the motivation is kind of a result. It's not a thing that you choose ahead of time. It's a result of all the other things that you do. And I'm going to put in the chat, there's a great TED Talk on pecking order. It's and team dynamics, and it talks about kind of what Jeremy was referring to is all your superstars aren't going to get you there. So,
Dr. Martha, let's go to you.
Well, there's so much to consider here. You know, I think that what Dr. Ariana was saying, there's the ideal, then there's the reality. When we look at teams, there are so many more variables to account for. When you're just looking at bringing one person on board, that's enough to consider there, right? There are so many things to look at there. But now you're looking at a group of people, and you want to put together a group of people that works well together, that can get you results, that hopefully complements each other. All the individuals complement each other, strengths compensate for other people's weaknesses. It's interesting what Dr. Jeremy brought up about the superstars, because there could be some issues there. If you have too many of these superstars on one team, we could have an ego situation there. Even if you have one superstar on a team, I think it's very important not to highlight that too much, because you may create a certain envy, certain resentment from other team members. So it's so important that we pay attention to every individual on that team so that we can highlight their talents, what they can do for the team, how they can contribute to the team, and how they make the team a whole. You know, interdependent tasks between team members are a good way to see how the team works together. If they can work together through interdependent tasks, that gets the job done, then you have a very good start. So there are so many things to consider, but when looking at a successful team, we have to be cognizant of the individuals, and we have to nurture each individual so that they are able to contribute their best to the team. At the same time, we have to be aware of those maybe negative members, because all it takes is one to affect the team dynamic, to affect the attitude, to affect the experience for the rest of the team. So in my opinion, it's very important to pay attention to the individuals as we're building teams.
Do I want to find a superstar who is a team player? And if I can, will that actually increase the skill level of the people around that? Will the whole team sort of grow together?
Oh, that would be ideal in terms of a superstar being a good team player. Because if you have a superstar that's more of an ego-focused person. I'm the one who's carrying this team, or look at this team, it is because of me. That's when problems are bound to arrive. But when you have someone who is able to perform and is also able to bring everybody else along, bring everybody else together, I think that's a winner.
Yeah, I totally agree. Brendan, let's go to you.
So I definitely want to add on what Linda Ann was saying about actually application of this. Definitely when if you're using the HCM model of attraction, engagement, retention, that's going to be a major play. You want to make sure you're attracting the right candidates, keeping them engaged, and then keeping them on the team. But where I've had some success with this is you kind of want to flip this and do this backwards. You want to write your job descriptions and look for the employees based off of what the mission, vision, values of the organization are. So those people are always going to be they're going to have higher chances of being intrinsically motivated because they're in line with the values and the mission of the organization. So there's less check-in with them because they're just naturally drawn to do this type of work, and they're going to be self-motivated, and doing that type of work is going to bring them enjoyment. So when you're trying to apply these things, when you're writing a job description, you want to make sure that within the job description, you're upholding all the values of the organization. And while you're managing and coaching these employees, making sure that the values are always upheld. One of the things I do with a lot of clients is with performance reviews, trying to get away from the rating system because people don't like it anymore. That's what is the common theme out there right now. So going more towards a coaching model, and the coaching model should be based off of what your values are. We like this. This was in line with the value. You did this. This is against our values. This is why we're having this coaching session. So less about disciplinary and more about alignment.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Lee, let's go to you.
I want to circle back to what Jeremy was talking about a little while ago. Every year there's a really interesting phenomenon in the Navy. One thing that's different in the Navy than others, for those who are selected to promote to Chief Petty Officer, it's E7, they are completely pulled out and put into a training pipeline. And it's intensive. You're expected to do your day job at the same time. And it's fascinating because they put all these people together. Now, if you're in a smaller place where you've got one or two, it's not as much of a thing. But here at the local command, you could have 30. And these are all your hot runners, right? These are all the guys who have been your Sailor of the Year. They have been the #1 in the rankings. They have done all these extra things to make themselves look good. And they're used to being the guy in charge because, most of them are the leading person in their workshops or whatever. And you take all these people and you throw them together. And they are not used to following a peer. They may be great if one of their superiors tells them something, but they are not used to following a peer. And so you put them in there and then you randomly say, okay, Timmy, you're in charge. And then you watch him fail spectacularly. And then you go, okay, Susie, you're now in charge. And you watch her fail spectacularly. And it is trial by fire. And this is it's like, I forget, 6 or 8 weeks that they put these guys through this, and they give them, more work than they can handle. They make things that they will fail if they don't work together. They put them in situations where they will fail if they don't reach out to the greater network. And every year, invariably, they are like the Keystone Cops when they start out. And I'd like to say my group was different, but I'd be lying. And, they go through and they can't find their backside with both hands when they start because they're not able to follow each other. And to watch the dynamic come out is very, very interesting. And sometimes you do get that one superstar, the guy that really can, it's not about me. I'm ready for all you guys to do better. And then all of a sudden people start kind of gravitating towards that person. And then you get the ones that just never get it. Just never. And it's painful to watch. And I have mentored many of these people. I have had people calling me in tears because they don't know how to fail. because they've never failed as spectacularly as they are. And it is fascinating to watch. It's almost like boot camp all over again. I mean, it's the breakdown and the build back up. And it was even more fascinating in 2020 because by and large, it was done virtually. And, here locally, we had 33 people or something, many of whom had never been in the same room together when the process was over. And of course, the little Brady Bunch square like we got going here, you can't hide, and I had a protege going through there. And I mean, every time they would call on her and I could just watch her kind of melt. And it's like, oh, I'm going to get a call later. And it is truly fascinating to watch. It is kind of like a super, an all-star team put together, like you were saying. I mean, you take all these guys and they don't know how to work together. And the team building, I mean, it really is a fascinating thing to watch and painful to go through.
Fascinating and scary to watch all at the same time. Dr. Harris, welcome to Work Cookie. Unmute your mic and join us.
Thank you so much. Definitely enjoying the conversation. And as I was listening to everyone, Dr. Jeremy, Dr. Martha, and everyone talk about team dynamics, I couldn't help but think about the dream team of 1992. You had Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, Chris Mullins, Magic Johnson, Charles Barkley. What's the justification for putting Michael Jordan on a bench? I mean, how do you say, according to this job rec and the dynamics of the team and the goal, we're going to sit you out, Michael? I think he's at a high level. And matter of fact, everyone on that team was at an extremely high level. And if I recall the story correctly, the coach, which I can't remember his name, I think the dream team played a college team, and I think the college team kind of demolished them. So that put them in a position to really self-check. And one of the things that Clyde Drexler said is they had to check their egos. Once they checked their egos, they were able to go through what we call the performing stage. So the stages of the team, right? I think it's what performing, norming, storming, and synergy. So to reach that level, I think you definitely need athletes, or you need people on your team who are specialized in a certain skill set. I definitely think you need people who are role players, but I think you need the commonality of what are the dynamics of the team for this team to function that this needs to be seen across the board. In a basketball team, everybody has to dribble. Everybody needs to be able to shoot. But equally, we need someone that's going to be able to rebound, because someone's going to always be in position to do that. And what does that look like in the corporate space or entrepreneurial space? How do we have that dynamic come together where it creates a synergy for the team to succeed? And I think it goes back to, I forgot who said, I think it was Brendan, talking about the goals, the values, and the mission and the vision. If you think about a goal itself by itself, it leads to an accomplishment. But when you have a goal tied to a vision, fueled by a mission, it leads to fulfillment. And I think that's where we get that intrinsic motivation to allow us to be successful. Thank you.
Let me ask you this, Dr. Harris. Are there any IOs working with professional sports teams? Because as you're talking, I'm going, that seems to be a natural.
I am not sure as professionals, but I think there are some in the college level. I have a peer, she played for the WNBA, and her dissertation was based upon that. But I'm pretty sure there are some. Clemson University, I think, is one, but it's a good opportunity, I think.
See, Jeremy, we've got one more career we have to add to the list of IO potential jobs. Linda Ann, let's go to you.
Yeah, I wanted to just comment on, and depending on really the purpose of the particular team, I think that when you're hiring people and when you're doing a lot of teams, that you need to see if you can get people who have potential rather than experience. And the reason I say that is because if you imagine putting a group of 5 or 6 people together who all have potential, but may not have a lot of experience in a particular project or task or whatever that is, think about how they might go about achieving the goal of the project. Versus if you put together a team of people who have all done this task before, and how they will automatically sit in a particular role and do it the way it's been done before. And so I think when you look at hiring people for or putting them in teams with potential versus experience, and then looking at what the path to growth is and helping them get that through to that path, that creates that intrinsic motivation, that engagement, that energizing that you're really looking for. And because if you're putting somebody in, whether it's hiring them with all the experience that you think you need already, they're already underemployed, right? They don't see the future process isn't there for them. And you really want to be looking for that. Where's that path forward? And am I helping them get there? Am I helping them develop that?
Let me ask you this, though, because here's the part that scares me. When I hear hire for potential, not experience, are you excluding older workers?
No.
Okay.
I mean, older workers, I learn all the time. I mean, and so it doesn't mean just because you have a lot of experience, it doesn't mean you've done everything. Where do you want your next step to be?
Are you saying that I still
I think that's, yeah, you just take the age out of that. Say
okay,
again?
I still have potential?
Absolutely.
Hey, Dr. Martha, let's go to you.
I think you have tremendous potential. Well, one thing that I wanted to mention is how important engagement and communication is. Sometimes you can do all the right things and hire someone or bring someone on board, and maybe it turns out you didn't get what you thought you were getting from that person. So communication and engagement can be a saving grace, because if you get to know this person, if you know what it is they're capable of, if you know what it is that they want, if you know what would make them happy and fulfilled, and therefore better, more productive employees, better citizens of the organization, it's not going to happen by chance. You have to be engaged with those individuals and engaged in conversation with them. And I see sometimes companies will do that. Maybe this is not what we thought we were getting, but let's see how we can take what we have in this person, discover what else there is in this person, and then apply it to our team, to our organization, so that everybody gets the most out of this relationship. Other times, unfortunately, a person gets brought on board, and whether or not they're a good match, whether or not they're happy, whether or not the organization got what they thought they were getting, they're kind of left and forgotten, and they're expected to fend for themselves. So it's so important that engagement and communications continue after the person is brought on board, because you might be missing out on something wonderful that you didn't even know you had. So that's just one more thing that's so important when it comes to groups and teams.
And Dr. Jeremy, Dr. Martha has sort of brought us back to that communication aspect. And, as you often talk about, just talking to your employees.
Yeah, it's all about aiming for reciprocation and affective commitment. I want to go back to, when you look at potential, think just how vast our world is in terms of job functions, and in terms of the multipliers of things that can be done. Like, let's say you're a good, let's say you're a good artist. How many different things in terms of, art could you do? You go to a different spot, there's a whole new different thing, a place. There's, whether it's nature, whether it's this or that. Think if you're in construction, right? Think of how many different things you've got. buildings. You can transport yourself to, think about if you're in Mars, what would you build? When you come to an organization, you have so much knowledge and there's so much potential that you can do for that particular organization. And it's not as much as what potential do they have in order for this certain person to grow. It's what can they take and how can they grow the company.
Right.
Think of how many CEOs, I think it was I'm probably way off here, but isn't like the CEO of Ford, didn't they come from the food business or something like that? You can, it doesn't matter. You don't have to have the knowledge of a specific industry, but there's so much value that you can add. So going back to reciprocation and affective commitment, we talk about this a lot. It's the emotional attachment that you have to an organization or to a person or to a boss. And that's the strongest form of commitment that we can actually have. Dr. Martha was saying about somebody hires and gets hired onto an organization, and then they become kind of set back on the back burner. We're hiring you to do a job. We're not really focusing on what you have to offer, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't, everyone has the potential to be a star player or at least the best mediocre player that they can be. And until you engage them and until you are that type of leader for them in terms of energizing a team, we're using a lot of, sports analogies here. It's really like taking your Michael Jordans, whatever it may be, giving them a backpack and putting bricks in that backpack, and then just making them work that extra harder to be able to play and to be able to perform. So if you're a manager or leader and you think about energizing your team, some people may say, I have the most energized team in the world. It couldn't be any better. The question then becomes, are you sure? What would happen if it had to become better? What would that look like? And also, we talk to people all the time who solve problems that they have, and they say, well, I've tried that. Well, I've tried that. My first thought always goes to, have you really done it well? Yes, you've tried it, but have you taken the right steps? Have you focused on it? And have you done it well? So if you're struggling with energizing your team and you're falling back to, well, I'm supportive of them. They like me. We have a good relationship. I don't know what else I could do. Think a little deeper in terms of what would it look like. Let's say that maybe pretend that every day they go to your boss and give them feedback. And is it all you want them to say is, my boss is really supportive, we get along? Is that really being an effective manager? My boss is supportive and we get along. So what do you want people to say behind your back? In other words, that's what our real reputation is anyway. And dig a little deeper. I've done so many exercises with people, and I say, in a perfect world, what does your team get? Or what does your team get out of you? And sometimes they'll say something to the effect of, well, they want results and they want to have more time. And then they get stuck. So it's very simple. You give them silence and you say, keep going. It's amazing what people will pull out in the next 10 minutes and write down. They want to be, and they start to get it. Sometimes it really is just taking this time. They might say, well, they want to be respected. Well, they want to be recognized. And then you might, and again, it's this communication. And sometimes we have to do it of ourselves if we don't have a good coach. And you might say, recognized. And they might say, yeah, they want to be recognized, but actually they don't want to be recognized in public because then they feel awkward and they don't know how to handle that. So then and then it's very simply, okay, what are some forms of recognition? Then they might understand, it's not necessarily outward recognition. It's appreciation and that feeling of being valued. So again, we're talking about this part of energizing and motivating a team. It's really, how are people left after they have a conversation with you? And if you're a boss, if you're trying to energize a team, we look at that individualism aspect like we did, and we also look at that team aspect. After a team meeting, on a scale of 1 to 10, how energized is your team? In the beginning of a meeting, how much are they looking forward to it? A little bit of a tangent here, Tom, but we talk to people all the time about, hey, we can't get my people on my team to turn their cameras on, right? Well, that says something, right, about how much they're looking forward to it and how much they actually value the meeting. But simple temperature checks are very helpful. Sometimes it takes asking those tough questions, having a little bit of, these courageous kinds of conversations. But in the back of your mind, think, what kind of feedback, if they were to go shout out to the world, the interactions that we had today, is it enough for them just to say, oh, they were supportive? Stay away from problem solving all the time. Ask good questions and let your team members think a little more deeply about the struggles they have during the day. And again, allow them to feel heard and understood, and allow them ask the right questions to them so that they can discover some of the underlying processes and challenges themselves.
You would be a very good theater director with that, working in that manner. Dr. Ariana, let's go to you.
Yeah, I'll touch on a few of the things that Jeremy was saying, but also going back first to our previous conversation around potential and whether or not you need to hire for expertise or whether or not, just the right attitude is enough. And I think something that's really helpful for people who are in this space to keep in mind is it really depends on how many applications you're getting. So essentially what we kind of learned from the research is that if you have a huge application pool, if you're one of those companies that's very attractive, your brand is strong, you're attracting a lot of people, you get to be a lot more selective. So if you have a giant pool of applications, you actually can select for skills and personality and maybe IQ if you're careful about it and things like that. But if you are not getting very many people, that's when you have to kind of shift into more of a training mode where you have to accept that you're gonna have to do more training. And we actually see that in certain industries that are facing some talent shortages, such as construction, sometimes the trucking industry, and one similar. And along that route, I also think that the job itself can vary based on expertise. So I think sometimes it helps to contextualize what we talk about. It might come across as more abstract with real examples. So if you are Starbucks and you're looking at your hiring model for baristas, maybe something like attitude and work ethic is more important, and maybe even agreeableness for team cohesion. Sometimes the training can be hard, but in the scheme of things, everyone can learn to do all roles within the Starbucks store. In contrast, maybe a PhD consulting team, master's, or maybe just bachelor's in IO, not discriminating based on degree level, but just needing specialization in this field, you might have to hold that as a criteria. That being said, you can always be flexible and, maybe hire someone in a different field than you normally would, and they can bring different attitudes and perspectives and backgrounds. So that can be helpful as well. And then I also just wanted to just say that I absolutely agree with what Dr. Jeremy was saying about the culture really matters and is 50% of the equation in this, right? If you select someone, but then leave them in this toxic culture or just kind of ignore them, that's like, not to say too severe, but that's like almost workplace neglect, where like we have a responsibility to form these connections in our workplaces and making sure that people feel included, like they know what the team expectations are, like they have the resources to do their tasks. And then that one that he was mentioning around recognition is huge. As many of you guys know from my work, we do organization-wide assessments where we see how employees fall on many cultural dimensions. And we're seeing a trend over the last couple of years is seeing employee recognition as one of the lowest. So people are really struggling to recognize their employees' efforts. We can be so focused on the outcome and the bottom line in business, where how a job is done and if the values are upheld during the work processes, that can just go by the wayside. And as Dr. Jeremy was saying, it's not about employee rewards. Like I feel like people think of those big team meetings and like one employee gets recognized. I don't know why. I don't have any research behind it, but I kind of cringe at those. It's really about thank you for doing this. I saw how you went above and beyond on this. Wow, I really liked your creativity on this project. Those are the little day-to-day comments that make employees feel like they matter.
It's really critical, Dr. Ariana, as you say, to make sure that if you're going to recognize your employees, it's something they appreciate. I know of an organization where once a month they have ice cream, but nobody really cares. they would rather some other form of recognition. So is it vitally critical to, once again, talk to your employees and figure out the type of recognition that they would feel good with?
I think so. I mean, feedback is always critical. And I've seen that work well. I've seen where an employee does an event where they give $25 to Uber Eats and everyone orders a meal. And I've seen people go crazy for that. It's like, wow, they're buying me lunch. This is above and beyond. We never do this. What are you eating? Like, but on the flip side, if you're not tuning in and not taking feedback, and I've also seen companies where they're like, take your swag, we got it. The people are like, we don't want these sweatshirts, you know, like, so you really do need to tune in and being willing to even like post a really simple Google form, just capturing feedback, because you don't want to be pushing something on someone. That's almost worse than doing nothing.
Yeah, I remember my days of post-secondary. I was with an institution for 5 years. They had this annual ceremony with recognition. And for 5 years, I got a really nice meal and a certificate. Didn't really feel appreciated. Brendan, let's go to you.
So definitely piggyback on what Dr. Ariana said is that I see a lot of companies trying to use selection methods when they have a recruiting issue. So you can't do selection methods when you have two candidates. Now, we had a discussion the other day about where could we see IO in popular culture or things like that. So Jeremy's going to love this one. I don't know where this came out of, but I thought about when Kramer was trying to find someone to drive the rickshaw for him, and he has the two candidates who are both homeless, and one of them takes off with the rickshaw, and then the other one by default just gets the job because he's the only remaining one. You really wouldn't be able to use any selection methods when you only have those two candidates. And just something else that Jeremy said that, like, again, getting back more serious, but that I attended a conference and one of the speakers was talking about analytics. And again, this is analytics, but this applies to other portions of business as well, is that you want to address your red flags, but you also want to address your green flags to make sure that you're progressing. So if you're green flags, you should be turning them red to make sure that they're going to get better. And that's where you see the most brilliant minds in society just making progress with things where this is good and everyone's like, this is good, but then they make it better. And that's why I have an iPhone 13 Pro Max now, because the iPhone 6 at the time was great, but this is far better. And then soon enough, I'll have an iPhone 20.
And I still have an iPhone 5. Dr. Martha, let's go to you.
What will it take to get you into an iPhone 13, Tom? So I wanted to go back to what Dr. Jeremy said, because I was loving what he said about the leader who says, my team is energized, they're doing great. Well, are you sure? How do you know? Because here we are looking at the collective, we're looking at the team, and we're saying, okay, how can we maximize what's happening with this team, all the good stuff? But it all goes back to the individual. What's going to energize one person doesn't mean it's going to energize everybody. That's where that engagement and communication comes in so important, comes in as such an important skill. And you might think that your team is at the top of its game, but maybe your idea of what the top of the game is very limited, and you're shortchanging your team. So it's so critical to have that engagement with your team. And as far as different forms of recognition, it's very interesting, because that is very individual as well. One person may love to have that free lunch. Well, what about that lactose intolerant person who is getting ice cream? They couldn't care less about that. And I've also seen people who are being recognized in front of their peers for whatever appreciation the company is trying to bestow upon them, and they would rather disappear because they're so embarrassed to stand in front of a group, even though it's a group of people that they work with every day. So essentially they're being tortured as their reward. So again, know your people, know the individuals on the team. What's going to energize them? What's going to make them appreciate being there? What's going to motivate and drive them? And then you will have a collective reward at the end.
I'd like you to be my boss. Dr. Harris, let's go to you.
I second that. We were talking earlier about potential and attitude. I put in the comments, hire for attitude, train for success. And when I said that, that doesn't really exclude the person with experience. It just means it's talking about the person's overall evaluation toward the specific position, toward the actual company as well. And I think it comes out of I can't remember the book, but I think it's by Gatewood, Field, and Barrick, where they talk about the selection and training process. We have two opportunities to get the best out of people: when we hire them and when we train them. So we really need a talent management strategy that accommodates our organizational strategy. Here we are right now, but this is where we want to be in 10 years from now. So when I have my selection process, am I selecting, or do I have a pool of candidates that not can only fulfill the role and where we desire to be years from now, but when we decide to take on this new technology because of the trends that are taking place, are they capable? Do they have the ability to be able to grasp the training that comes along with it, as well as the current employees as well?
Yeah, I agree. Linda Ann, let's go to you.
Well, hallelujah and amen to that. So just to build on that a little bit, when we're looking at companies that don't have a huge pool, that's a time, other than, some in professions, there's just a shortage, whether it's nurses or something like that. That's not the case in most companies that are having a few applicants to it. And so it's your time to look at, why are we not getting the applicants? What can we be doing differently that gives us the reputation that people will want to work for us? And you don't need to have the little emblem that says you're the best company to work for. You just need to have some chatter in the industry, come work for my company, and give them reasons for that. So if you're not getting candidates, it's a time for you to be reflective and figure out, what is it that we can be doing differently, because there's a way that you can change that. That's one thing. And then to build on some of the things that Jeremy was saying, as far as recognition, it's one thing to, you don't want to make someone feel uncomfortable, as Dr. Martha was saying, but there's a couple other ways. One of the things that I would always tell some of the division managers was to keep in your budget, a fund for, the $50 bill or the $100 bill. And when somebody just knocked it out of the park, just slap it on the desk or something like that. And it's like, and everybody goes, wow, kind of thing. But in addition, when people use their communication tool, whether it's Teams or Slack or whatever, to call somebody out and say, so-and-so did a great presentation the other day, some top leaders can take that and write a thank you note. And I'm going to say that because they mean a lot. When you get a note from somebody at top management, people care. And the prime example of that is the person who, I can't remember his name, but he took over Campbell Soups when it was failing. And he did several things besides getting rid of people who didn't perform. He wrote, during his tenure there, over 20,000 thank you notes to employees. And he had ways to get the reports, for who had done what, but he had a car driving him to and from work where he was, and he would take that time to just write thank you notes, and people all over the company had them on their bulletin boards or whatever. They mean something. So it doesn't have to be this huge thing, to expensive process or whatever, to recognize people, but they matter.
Yeah, but if you want to throw $100 my way.
There you go.
Renwick, good to see you again. Let's go to you.
Yeah, this is an excellent conversation again. I've gotten used to these, so thank you for everyone who's contributed. Just a couple of random thoughts, and the most random of which is this old saying, you dig your well before you need the water. Didn't learn it in university. Somewhere along the way, I heard it said, and it applies so deeply to what we're talking about. And in particular, on the matter of culture and branding, so that you, as an organization, can be incredibly attractive. and able to, with your activities wherever you are in a moment, whether it's at a conference or in the office or on social media, to name a few examples, the substance and tone of your messaging, and in your, this time, everyone in the organization's messaging is such that you're desirable. People out there who are not yet looking notice you and want to be a part of this that is so awesome. Right? So there's that idea from the standpoint of branding and building a culture that helps with selection. And then there's also the other element, and many of you have alluded to it as you've talked about intrinsic motivation. And isn't that the case, that we all do things for ultimately what are our reasons? And so part of the role of leaders is to create and nurture an environment that facilitates ongoing discovery of the desires of each individual in the organization, so that individually and collectively we could arrive, or they could arrive at shared interests, those commonalities that cause them to collectively be motivated and remain highly motivated to be better with each and every day and contribute in most significant ways to the organization. So those are just a couple of random thoughts that occur to me as I listen to you share your splendid ideas.
Well, and that makes so much sense to me, because, you know, if I'm an employee, I want to feel like I'm growing and like I'm valuable, but I also want that sense of I'm part of something larger than myself. Are those the two sort of keys that we really need for a team?
You know, to answer that question in an interesting way, you know, there's this sense that they're insiders and outsiders of organizations. And I'm always struck by the possibility that by looking to the outside, we might discover someone who is not just a contributor, is a transformer. So while we may think of ourselves as being in the business of finding talent and developing it, what if that talent found us and developed us?
I would like that. So Jeremy, are we looking for, you know, agents of transformation?
I think we're looking for agents of perspective change and thought transformation. That's why I really love what Rennick is saying, because it's about looking at these things quite differently than we normally do. We talk a lot about, motivating a team, and it's important to go back to, instead of motivating, how do we remove barriers to motivation, because people are naturally motivated, and what are we doing there? As it's also important to look at compounding effects. You know, how many times in your life, personal relationships, professional relationships, somebody has spoken up because they're upset with you? That very specific issue, is that really the issue of why they're speaking up? Or is it a lot of different issues and finally they're just speaking up? Usually it takes a length of time that something's been eating at someone, or it takes an intensity of something, or it takes a bunch of things happening together, and then somebody finally speaks up. So if you have an employee that's coming to you and saying, this is an issue, or I'm not motivated because of this, or whatever it may be, try to look at the different barriers that can be removed. I think you'd be surprised at figuring out, here are the different underlying things going on. Here's one barrier I can remove. And lo and behold, removing that particular barrier to someone's motivation could just open automatically a lot of the other flood doors as well. It's important to change our perspective. I can't help but think of one of my terrible analogies, which I just thought of, opening, if it's really hot inside your house and you open a window, opening your window does not make the house cooler. That it's the air that comes in. because guess what? It could be hotter outside. Opening a window doesn't do it. But this is the kind of thinking that we need to go through, is start to think more about cause and effect, underlying issues, and what can actually be done, and just changing that little bit of perspective. Tom, next week we will be talking about linking speaking of motivation, linking measurement to motivation. Linking measurement to motivation is what we're talking about next Thursday.
And just before this hour has flown by, any updates on CBOC and what's happening there?
Check out the events. We have a lot of good events going on. Next week, we have our mixer with Iowa military experts, Destiny Preet's organization. That is, I believe it's on the 16th, but check out cboc.com/events for upcoming events, and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't yet. That's all I got, Tom. Should I just count out?
Yeah, I think we may as well.
All right. Well done. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions. As always, counting out in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.